was struck by was how different each of the voices was, and how different each of the stories was, and how incredibly complex the journey was. And I just want to make a few brief points. The program is not really meant to hear from a psychologist, and it's certainly not meant to hear from anybody other than the four men you just heard from. Point number one is obvious. I think it's incredibly important for all of us here to understand that this was not an easy path for anybody who we just heard. And to the extent that we have to understand that we can't judge anybody until we've stood in their shoes. And I think that the important take-home message that we all have to understand is that this is not, I think there's often kind of this ignorance that somehow this is a hedonistic choice, or that it's somehow a choice that comes with ease. It wasn't. And that's what's so important about the messages we all just heard. The second point I wanted to make, which was made by a number of the men, is feeling isn't doing. It's not the same thing. Nobody has the right to judge a feeling. Okay, we're in an institution where there are very clear guidelines and very clear halachic guidelines, which is not what tonight is about. But I think a very important lesson in life is the lesson that there's a huge difference between validating and being empathic and being there for somebody and supporting them, and necessarily agreeing. Validation and agreement are two different things. And the cry that I'm hearing tonight is one asking for validation and understanding. And I don't think we have to be concerned that that somehow means that we're 100% through doing that, not being true to the internal values and halachic principles through which we're living. And I think that's another important point. And the final point, which I think was made beautifully by Joshua at the very beginning, is how, and actually it was made by all four, language brings control. One of my colleagues, Bessel van der Kolk, once showed me an fMRI of one of his patients who was a survivor of the World Trade Center. And he showed me that as he was having a flashback to the worst moment of his life, that horrible day when basically he practically didn't make it, Brokaw's area was shut down. The language centers of the brain were shut down. He was literally rendered speechless. Then he showed me subsequent fMRIs that how in the course of therapy, as he named the monster and he gave words to his pain, that's where healing came. Healing comes from lighting up Brokaw's area. Healing comes from giving words. And as we heard, and as all four of the panelists said in different ways, as you talk about the pain, and as you talk about the struggle, and you come to the process of belonging and rejoining the community, although perhaps in a different key and in a different way, greater control comes and greater observance comes. That's what I was hearing. It may not be observance in completely the way that we like to think about it, but as belonging comes and membership in the community comes, greater observance comes as well in other areas. And I was hearing that as well. I think that now I said what I said. I'm sure that not everybody's going to agree with what I said, But let's go to the remainder of the program, which is to respond